Billionaire's son, born blind, until a poor, homeless girl exposed the truth that changed his life. In the bustling city of New York, billionaire Richard Stanford carried an empire that touched every corner of finance and industry. But in the silence of his mansion, he carried a grief no wealth could erase. His only son, Adrian, had been born blind, and despite every effort to change that reality, doctors flown from around the world, treatments that cost fortunes, technologies designed only for the wealthy, nothing had ever worked. Adrian grew up in a gilded prison, surrounded by luxury yet isolated from the world, living with a constant sense of pity from those around him. His father buried himself in work, convincing himself that money could shield Adrian from the world's cruelty. But in truth, it left the boy lonelier than ever. Then, one rainy evening in the city park, fate intervened. Adrian was sitting alone, listening to the rhythm of rain against the leaves, when a girl's voice broke through the darkness. She was Maya, a homeless teenager who carried her own scars, yet spoke with a strength Adrian had never encountered. Unlike others, she did not whisper in sympathy or treat him as fragile. She spoke to him as if he were whole, teasing him, challenging his ideas, and forcing him to laugh in ways he had forgotten were possible. Days turned into weeks as they met in secret, and slowly Maya noticed things no doctor had ever pointed out. The way his eyes flickered in response to light, the way he instinctively turned toward moving shapes, the subtle hints that his blindness might not be absolute. One evening she told him what no one else had dared. "Adrian, I don't think you're completely blind." Shock coursed through him, but her words lit a spark of hope. Determined to prove the truth, Maya dragged him to a tiny free clinic run by volunteer doctors. There, with simple tests and unpretentious honesty, the results stunned them both. Adrian wasn't fully blind. He had a rare, overlooked condition that could be treated with the right surgery and therapy. The revelation cut deep. How could the wealthiest hospitals and world-renowned specialists have missed what a struggling girl and a modest clinic could see? The answer was clear: arrogance and neglect. His father's obsession with elite solutions had blinded him to real possibilities. For Adrian, it was both heartbreaking and liberating. With Maya at his side, he chose to undergo treatment, and months later he opened his eyes to a world bursting with light and color. The first face he focused on was hers. The girl who had nothing yet gave him everything. Richard, humbled by the truth, realized that his empire meant little compared to the love and honesty his son had found in a stranger. For Adrian, sight was not the greatest gift. Truth was, and it had taken a poor, homeless girl to reveal it. ChatGPT said billionaire Richard Stanford was admired by the world for his empire. But behind the gates of his grand mansion, he carried a grief that money could never fix. His only son, Adrian, had been born blind, and despite endless consultations with the world's top doctors and millions spent on advanced treatments, nothing ever worked. Adrian grew up sheltered, trapped in luxury yet starved of real connection, pitied by everyone who met him. His father buried himself in business, mistaking wealth for protection, while Adrian drifted through life in silent isolation. One rainy evening, seeking escape from his golden prison, Adrian sat on a park bench and listened to the rhythm of rain and the hum of the city. A soft voice interrupted, asking if she could sit beside him. It belonged to Maya, a homeless girl who carried her scars with quiet dignity. Unlike everyone else, she didn't speak to him with pity. She teased him, argued with him, and treated him as someone capable of more than his blindness. Days passed, and the two met again and again, their conversations pulling Adrian out of the shadows of loneliness. Yet Maya noticed something strange, something no doctor or specialist had ever considered. The way Adrian's eyes reacted faintly to light, the way he tilted his head to follow movement, the instinctive signs of partial sight. One evening, her voice trembled as she told him, "Adrian, I don't think you're completely blind." At first he dismissed it, but hope took root in his heart. Determined, Maya brought him to a modest free clinic staffed by doctors who worked with compassion instead of prestige. Tests were run, and the results shook him to his core. Adrian wasn't fully blind. He suffered from a rare but treatable condition that had been overlooked for years. The truth was devastating. It wasn't fate that had trapped him in darkness, but negligence caused by arrogance and misplaced trust in only the most elite hospitals. With Maya's courage pushing him forward, Adrian underwent surgery and months of treatment. The day he finally opened his eyes to see light, colors, and the world he had only imagined, his breath caught. The first face he saw was Maya's. The girl who had nothing yet gave him everything. Richard Stanford, humbled by the truth, realized his fortune could never replace honesty and courage. His empire felt small compared to the miracle of his son's restored sight. Adrian's life was transformed, but not just because he could see, because he had learned the value of truth, the strength of love, and the power of a girl who the world had overlooked. Adrian had lived his whole life in darkness, surrounded by walls of wealth that never brought him closer to the light. His father, billionaire Richard Stanford, had spent millions seeking answers, hiring the best specialists money could buy, and yet every door had closed with the same verdict. His son would never see. Adrian accepted this fate with quiet pain, burying his longing for the world he had only imagined. Then came Maya, a homeless girl who entered his life like an unexpected flame. She spoke to him differently, not as a fragile soul, but as someone capable, teasing him, challenging him, making him feel alive. Over time, she noticed subtle things others had missed: the way his pupils shifted when light flickered, the way his head turned slightly toward movement, the instinctive signs that his blindness might not be total. One evening, as they sat together, she whispered with conviction, "Adrian, I don't think you're completely blind." Her words struck him harder than anything he had ever heard. For the first time, hope dared to rise within him. Maya insisted on taking him to a small clinic in the poorer part of the city, a place worlds away from the marble floors and polished halls of elite hospitals. The doctors there ran simple tests, and what they revealed shook Adrian's entire world. He wasn't born fully blind. He had a rare but treatable condition, something overlooked for years because his father's pride had never allowed for second opinions outside prestigious institutions. The truth was crushing. He had spent his whole life in darkness not because of destiny, but because of arrogance and neglect. The revelation hit Adrian like a storm, filling him with anger at the years stolen from him, but also with a new fire. He had a chance, however small, to see. He clutched Maya's hand, her steady presence reminding him that this truth was not an end, but a beginning. For the first time in his life, he wasn't powerless. The possibility of light was real, and it had been revealed not by money, not by power, but by the courage of a homeless girl who refused to accept what the world had stamped as permanent. Adrian's heart pounded as he realized everything he had been denied could finally change, that the world he had touched but never seen might soon be his to behold, and in that moment hope became stronger than fear. Months later, after enduring weeks of uncertainty, pain, and slow recovery, Adrian finally reached the day that would change his life forever. The surgery had been long, the treatment exhausting, and at times he had wondered if hope itself was too heavy to carry, but through it all, Maya never left his side. She sat with him during the long nights when fear threatened to consume him, holding his hand and reminding him that light was waiting. When the bandages were carefully unwrapped and the first rays of daylight touched his eyes, Adrian gasped. For the first time in his life, he saw not just shadows but colors. Soft whites, gentle blues, the warm glow of sunlight filling the room. His heart pounded as shapes became clearer, and the blur of a face slowly sharpened before him. It was Maya, her eyes wet with tears, her smile trembling but radiant. She was the first person he had ever truly seen, the one who had believed in him when no one else had. Overwhelmed, Adrian reached for her hand, whispering that she had given him the greatest gift of all, not just sight, but the courage to believe in himself. News of the miracle reached Richard Stanford, who entered the hospital room humbled and broken. For the first time, the billionaire looked not at his son's weakness, but at his strength, and he realized the truth he had been blind to all along. His fortune, his empire, his power, all of it had meant nothing compared to the love and honesty of a girl who had once slept on the streets. Richard wept, apologizing for the years of loneliness his pride had created, and promised that from that day forward, things would be different. Adrian, however, no longer needed wealth or pity to define him. He had seen the world, and he had seen the one person who mattered most. He chose to walk beside Maya, not as a blind heir trapped in shadows, but as a man reborn with vision and gratitude. Their story became more than a tale of medicine or money. It became proof that truth could heal where arrogance had failed, that light could rise out of darkness, and that sometimes the poorest soul carries the richest gift. For Adrian, sight was not the end of his journey, but the beginning, a chance to live not with despair, but with purpose, guided forever by the girl who had opened his eyes to the world.